You know, when Brian asked me if I'd say a few words to you, he specifically asked me if I'd share my original story of when I was first introduced to this water. And some of you may know that story, some of you may not know that story, so I'll try and tell it succinctly, but you're going to hear a little bit of a different ending to it today, perhaps, because some things have changed. But it was in the early 1980s when I first went with a group of about a dozen, there was actually 13 of us, doctors and acupuncturists, and we went to Asia for about 4 weeks, and our intent was to learn about and see if we could learn how to incorporate particularly the science and the practice of acupuncture into medical practices, and particularly how they were doing it in the hospitals. That was the purpose of the trip. We were all licensed acupuncturists at the time and doctors, and we wanted to see if there was a way we could do something that wasn't being done in the U.S. at that time. And quite honestly, you're seeing the results of that trip today, because many hospitals today are using acupuncture as part of their therapies, and that's a wonderful thing, I promise you. And so we learned some of those things on that trip. What I did not anticipate on that trip was learning something about water that would change my life. And again, this was in the 1980s, so just keep that in mind. Nobody was talking about ionized water back then. And so while I was there, I happened to be in Japan. We were moving from hospital to hospital. And in one of the hospitals that we were at, I walked in and had been doing some things with some of the Japanese doctors. And I heard this guy, I knew he was from the South. He ended up being from Texas. But I heard him speaking English, and I'd been in in Asia, excuse me, for a few weeks. And that really tickled me, because I was hearing it from somebody besides those 12 guys that I was with. And it was wonderful. And so I went over, I introduced myself, and he was in a wheelchair. And he had his legs under a blanket. And I asked him why he was there, and he said that he'd been in a horrible accident and that his legs had been injured, and basically at that point the doctors here in the States wanted to amputate his legs. And he said, I'm a really active guy, I have been my whole life, and I don't want to give up my legs. I got to say, I don't blame him a bit. Made totally good sense to me, but they were turning gangrene. And when you start seeing the gangrene issue, and it was starting to become a problem, doctors felt like there was no other solution. But somebody had told him that they had a special process they could use. So he went to Japan after being assured that they could most likely save his legs. And actually, in the 10 days or so that we were in that area, I witnessed his legs being saved. And it was a miracle. But I have to tell you, when he first told me about it, he said the doctors, he'd just met with them, and they were going to treat him with water. And I coughed, I think, into my hand and looked away a few times to try and get the grin off my face, and I went, whoa. I'm thinking to myself, he's flown all the way to Japan from Texas. It had to have been a miserable trip. And he believes they're going to save his legs with water. That was my initial reaction. So I'm being totally honest with you here, but I didn't think his chances were very good. Boy, was I surprised when I saw a few days later, after they started giving him water to drink. They obviously had his diet very carefully monitored, but they also were using the water externally, and it was constantly being used on his legs and his feet. And you started to see not only the gangrene stop, but then the pink tissue starting to form and the healing process start to occur. Now, it wasn't 10 days and he was better. Don't misunderstand me, but I was only there 10 days. But I saw that the problem had stopped and the healing process had started. And I knew right then there was something to this crazy water they were talking about, and I had to learn more. What intrigues me about that really is this. There were 13 doctors present. We all witnessed the same thing, and only one of us thought it was amazing. The others said they couldn't believe it could be true, so it wasn't true, and therefore I've never heard one of them talk about it since. And I find that kind of interesting, don't you? I want you to keep that in mind when you're out and about and you're talking to people, whether they're doctors or not, it doesn't really matter. I think you have to understand that when it's hard to believe, sometimes people just won't accept it. The proof could be right in front of your eyes, and maybe you can't see it about certain things, and they can't either. So be willing to understand that sometimes we're out there a little bit with this crazy water stuff, and everybody just can't get it. And don't lose your patience. Don't lose yourself and your goals and your ideals by buying into that and taking it personal. I think that's the thing I want to say is don't take it personal. Just understand that not everybody is where you are. You guys are kind of on the cutting edge. I don't know if you realize that or not, but you know, it takes a certain person to really get this stuff and to be open to something this crazy, so to speak. So congratulate yourself, number one. The other thing I want to tell you is that crazy Texas friend of mine who I met there and became friends with did get his legs better, did come back to the U.S., and he lived several more years before he died of something completely unrelated. Wonderful man, and it's thrilling to watch people get their lives back. And most of you in this room know that. You've seen those miracles. You've participated, maybe not in something quite that dramatic, but you've had that opportunity. But that's the second thing that I wanted to share with you today and talk about for just a few minutes, and that is I still get, on the average, 1 or 2, sometimes as many as 5 calls every week from people who someone in an Enagic has told that the water is going to be the solution to whatever is wrong with them, and it hasn't been. And then they find me and want to know what's wrong with it, and some of them are even having other issues caused by the water. And we won't go into all of that except to say that we have to understand that water is not the only thing that makes us healthy. And I really want you to understand where I'm coming from, only because we have to do the right thing here. And when we start making people believe that everything that's wrong with them will be healed by Kangen Water, we're lying to them. We really, truly are. So we need to help them understand that it's part of the program. It's part of the change they need. And I would call it the foundational thing. Because as we've all learned, we're more water than anything else. But you can drink all the Kangen water in the world, and if you don't sleep, you're still going to be unhealthy. And if you don't believe me, just stay awake for the next week and watch how you feel. Try it. Just don't sleep. Or if you would rather, don't eat. You see, eating is very necessary too. Oh yeah, we can get by for a while. But sooner or later, you have to keep eating. You have to keep getting that nutrition in your body for those cells to work right. And when you quit, problems will occur. You can take poison. You can drink all the water in the world and take poison, and you're still going to die. Do you understand that? So these things are important. And when I talk to my patients, I teach them there are 5 vital foundations to good health. The first one, and I'm not particularly saying these in any order, but the first one to me is always hydration. You've got to be hydrated. And that's where the Kangen water comes into play. And once your body is hydrated, it works better in many, many ways. Then you've got to have proper nutrition. It's got to be good, healthy nutrition. And the science is there. If you don't believe it, just pick up the China study, for example, by Dr. Colin Campbell. And you will see concrete evidence of 20 years of research showing that the most of our health problems are caused by 3 things: breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Seriously. So what we put in our mouths is hugely important. But let's say that you're doing those 2 right, you can still have health problems. You know why? because maybe you're not getting a sufficient amount of sleep. And I don't know about the rest of you, but I've noticed that most people in America today are stressed. And when people are stressed, their cortisol levels go up. Their stress hormones start to overtake them. They don't sleep as well. And then the next thing you know, their sleep cycle gets off, and then they're not getting adequate rest. Their body's not repairing itself. And a whole bunch of things start to happen to make you sicker and sicker and sicker. And it's really hard to get off that nasty cascading little pathway. And you have to change some things in a big time way to get yourself back on path sometimes. But even if you've got adequate hydration and you're getting enough sleep and you're eating well, there's still a couple more things you have to do to be healthy long term. You might get away with it for a few minutes, or a few days, or even a few months. But eventually, if you're not getting adequate physical activity, doesn't mean you have to work out hard at the gym. That's not what I mean. But you have to get physical activity in every single day. And if you're getting that in, and then you also have the fifth key element, which in my mind is a positive attitude, a positive mental attitude, a good outlook on life, or as Dr. Filzer said earlier, you know, you have to come from the heart. You have to love people, and you got to quit having so many enemies and so many other people to blame. That's what it's all about. Those 5 things will help you be healthy. And I took the time to go through those just to reinforce what Dr. Filzer said this morning, because I want you to leave here knowing that you have to tell people the whole story. Please don't imply to anybody that just drinking water is going to fix everything that's ever been wrong with them in their whole life. It will not get rid of the pain of losing a loved one. It will not give them a job if they've lost their job. And I don't care how hard or how much water they drink, it's not going to do it. So these things have to be balanced out, and we just need to take a big look at that. So I would like to say, from my heart, you've got something very special. You know about something very special. Continue to share it from your heart. Let people know what it's all about, but help them understand that there's other things that are important to do too. And be the teacher, be the example. If I want somebody else to do it, I have to do it too. Or else I'm not teaching by example. I'm saying, do what I say, not as I do. And I've found in my life, I don't know about the rest of you, but I've found in my life, that doesn't work very well. In fact, I always wanted to order people around and tell them, you know, like my kids, you know, this is just the way it is, do it my way. And my mentor said to me, if you think that works, just go over to your neighbors and order your neighbor's dog to roll over. And I did, and it didn't work. Didn't work on the neighbor's dog, didn't work on the kids, hasn't worked on anybody. So that approach doesn't work, so we just as well go to something that does. Share from your heart, be genuine, care about people, and you'll make a difference. And you know, we're not in the convincing business here, by the way, and I want to just make sure you understand that. We're in the sharing business. All we can do is share. If we try to convince somebody of the medicinal values of the water or the wonderful machine or anything else, it's going to be an uphill battle, because I don't know if you realize this or not, but there's not one of you in this room that wants to be convinced of anything against your will. And if you don't believe me, go talk to somebody that's of a different religion than you. Just have a little discussion. You'll soon find out that there's some resistance there. We don't like that. So as human beings, just keep that in mind as you're sharing. I think you'll find a lot of success. Now, Brian told me that if I would not talk too long, you could have a break before Mr. Oshiro comes. How many of you would like a break? Okay, that's what I thought. So I'm going to wrap this up and just say thank you once again for being here. Thanks for listening to me and giving me a chance to share with you. And particularly, thank you for all of you for being such great friends. And oh, now I got to tell you the machine story. Okay, you got it. one more thing. Sorry, if you want to go to the restroom, go ahead. But there's a little more to this story that I didn't tell you. When I got back from Japan on that original trip back in 1984, I was really excited to share with people about the water because I'd seen a miracle. And not only that, I wanted to start drinking it every day. So I started, well, I went out there and started looking to find a machine. And there wasn't a lot of ionizers in 1984, in case you're wondering. But there was a couple of them that I found, and I looked and I did as much checking as I could, and I bought the first one. And I got it, and I was all excited, and I set it up, and I started drinking the water, and I started sharing it with patients, and I'm telling them how great they're going to feel, and all these things because I knew what it could do, and nobody noticed anything. It's kind of depressing. And I was a little embarrassed, and I thought, well, it must be that this is just a bad machine. So I did a little more research, and I went out and bought the other brand that was out there at the time, and basically same song, different verse. And I was a little more embarrassed because people trust me, and I don't normally put my reputation on the line unless I know I can deliver the goods, if you understand what I'm saying. And I believed I could, but I wasn't. So there was a few years there where I was frustrated, and I tried buying different machines as they came on the market. I learned a lot about ionizers and what they did and how they worked, and I thought I understood it well enough to know that I could pick a good one. But you know what? Even with all that knowledge, I was still buying machines that really weren't producing the results. Oh, once in a while somebody'd say, you know, I think it's helping, Doc, but you know what I knew? They were just getting more water down. But it wasn't doing what I was expecting. So at last count, I think there was about 15 or 16 different brands of machines, and several of those companies kept telling me, well, the newest, latest, and greatest is the one you got to have. So, you know, I had this big sucker sign on my forehead, and I said, I'm looking for Shangri-La, right? So I kept buying them and testing them by drinking the water, and unfortunately, nothing really got me excited until I got a call, was asked to go down. This was in July of 2006, I believe. And I remember Mita and Jeannie Basso and a few of us were actually on the Queen Mary, and I had a chance to drink this water. And it was there that I went, now this tastes like the water I remember. And it has a very distinct taste, not so much taste, but we all know that when you drink Kangen water, you can tell it goes down easier, smoother. Well, that's what I remembered from Japan. So I immediately bought a machine and started sharing that water, and you can read my book if you want to know some of the results, but it was completely different than previously. So that's kind of wrapping up the rest of that story. I have tested a lot of machines since then. I'm always looking for things that work, and I will tell you the only machines I've found that work at all are out of Japan, which is interesting. And the Japanese just have this whole electroplating down, and they've got the voltage regulated right, and those machines work. And we've got, you know, Enagic's got the best machine out there, no doubt about it. So we're very fortunate and very lucky to know that. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it, as they say. And again, thank you so much for being here. Take a few minutes, get a break, and then Mr. Oshiro, I think, is due to come in any moment. So unless Brian has something else he's going to tell you.
Wow. Thank you so much. Come on, everybody, give it up for Dr. Dave Carpenter. We love you, man. I mean, you've been a mainstay for us for so many years, and we're just so blessed to have you as the godfather doctor of Enagic right here in the United States of America.